This is Vivian John, and she's going to be the narrator. And my name is Connie Rushner, and I'm the interviewer. So, Vivian, when were you born?
1936, February.
So, you don't remember much about the Depression, or do you remember it
Oh,
all?
I remember.
Do you really?
Yes, I remember a lot. My first memory of being a war was my uncle was taken, and he had a Model T Ford. He used to drive us around in the rumble seat, and he was the only son, and he had to go. And when they examined him, they said he couldn't be out there where the fighting was. So they made him an ambulance driver. And he said they might as well have stuck him out in the front line because he had quite a go of it. But I can remember that part, and I remember going to the store for Mom, the things we had to buy that was rationed and things we couldn't buy, and it was
So what things were rationed?
meat, soap butter. You couldn't buy butter. You had to buy oleomargarine, and it was in a plastic bag. And you broke the coloring, and you had to work the coloring through and anything in that order. Sometimes we couldn't even get bread, but Mom made a lot of our bread, so that helped out. But no, I remember the ration stamps we had to carry. Yeah, gasoline was a thing. My dad didn't have a car at the time, but Grandpa I had been born crippled, and they had to take me to Children's Hospital, so I can remember the ration stamps for the gasoline.
Were you in Children's Hospital for a long time?
A long time. I didn't walk till I was almost 5 years old. Both my feet were club feet. And they had to straighten them. They didn't want to operate, so they put cast on them, and every time they changed them, they straightened them a little bit more. I hated those casts. But they helped. Yeah, they helped. So, and it's amazing now when I see babies that are born like that. It kind of makes me remember.
But now they just do surgery.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times, I don't know, the last few years I've seen a couple babies in the stirrup thing that they put in right away. But I also remember when we were in school, when we'd hear the planes coming over, how we had to dive underneath the desk, and how we had to, they taught us how to bend down to get in there and stay in there. And then at night, when we were at home, we had to draw the blackout curtains because you couldn't show any light. No light whatsoever. It was a great time, but it was a sad time. We used to have a lot of men killed in that war.
A lot of people that you knew?
Yes. As you said before, we were practically all related, but cousins around, and like I say, my uncle, he survived it. But my grandpap was a hoax, and he came. He had 12 brothers and sisters, and of course, all of his nieces and nephews, and my grandmother was a cousin's, and that's another big family. So we had a lot of people that way that were in. And another thing that I remember so plain was walking by people's home, and they'd have the flag in the window with the star of how many. And I often think of that. We respected that. Kids nowadays would not respect that little flag, but we did. We would stand there and look at them and talk about it. And if the people come out, we'd talk to them. But that to us meant a great deal. It really did. Yeah. I don't know why we have to have war. And of course, we all felt that we were in the right and they were in the wrong, but who knows? You never know.
Did you ever think we might lose?
No, that's one thing we always assumed that in the end we were going to come out on top because we were right and we had God on our side. Now that's another thing. During that war, everybody respected the Lord. Nowadays, you don't hear very much of that. I often wonder what this world's going to become because we still have war.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah,
we do.
And it's just as bad, I think, although we aren't as involved in it, but I think it's just as bad as it was back then. And we worried about the bombs, and we worried how one time that ship was coming into the New Jersey coastline. They were afraid they were going to send torpedoes or something into the land. And of course, we're quite a ways away from New Jersey, but not that far when it comes to things like torpedoes and explosions and things. It was a scary situation.
Do you remember Pearl Harbor Day?
Oh, yes, how we danced in the streets.
When the war ended?
Yes, oh my, I lived in a little town down the road called Cadogan. And the church bells rang all over the country. And the kids got out on the street, and of course some of the adults did their celebrating too. But we really, really celebrated that, yes. Yes, and we couldn't wait for the boys to come home.
And you danced?
Oh, yes. We danced in the street. We didn't have any music, but we made our own. Yeah. Oh, funny times we had.
What did your dad do?
My dad was a coal miner while I was a child, and then he got black lung, and then he had to go to a different type of job, but he was a coal miner.
In Cadogan?
Mm-hmm. He hated it, but he kept his family that way. And that was another thing between the war and that coal mine. Boy, you never knew when that whistle was going to blow.
Were there accidents? Do you remember?
My dad was in one. He was an electrician, and I was in school, and the siren went off. And I jumped up, and I remember I had a male teacher, and he said, "Sit back down." I said, "My dad's in that mine." Boy, I took off. And I got down there as they were bringing him up out. He had been burned. Put him in the ambulance and took him. Oh, yes, I remember a lot of those times.
So was he in the hospital for a long time?
No, he was in a couple of days, and then he came home, and we took care of him. Yeah.
And then he went back to work in the mine after that?
He went back, but he didn't work too awful much longer in the mine after that, because he didn't like it to begin with. And then that he had a friend that, my mom she was a little woman, but she was fierce. And even during the war, we didn't have a washing machine. We scrubbed our clothes on a scrub board.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad was a very particular man. He came home from the mine, he took his shower, he put a white shirt on and dress pants, and that's the way he was around the house. And of course, if his underwear had been gray, he wanted to work. So he had a friend, Sam Rustin, said to him one time, "Jimmy, if I ever get hurt, you put your underwear on me." Yeah, the funny things you do. But that was quite a time. And I can remember when the coal went on strike.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that's all we heated with down there. Well, then they didn't allow the coal trucks to come in with coal. And I can remember my dad and Steve Perchali and, I don't know how many of them, Sam Rustin, going out and stopping those coal trucks. They'd make them dump it. And then after they dump it, we kids would go and get it. Yeah, sometimes you wonder. But I can remember my Pap and Grandma. I have a picture in there of the house where they lived from Blair. And when he'd come home, the good times we'd have in that front yard, it was just, of course, he was the only boy.
What kind of things did you play?
Oh, well, one thing we did, Grandma grew hollyhocks. Grandma had them all along the walk. And of course, hollyhocks, you get the bees. Well, our favorite thing was to catch a bee inside one of the hollyhocks and then chase, especially my sister. I love her. But chase her and she'd just scream and holler and carry on. But we would play, and I also have a picture in there of the 4 girls of us having a picnic on a little table we had in the backyard, the dogs underneath the table. And, it was just good times. We'd play ball, we'd go chase the chickens. Pap had a barn where he had one corner that he had the pig in, and he had like a wooden fence up. And we'd climb that wooden fence and get up in the hayloft. And he told us, I don't know how many times about it, he said, "That pig bites." We didn't believe him. And one day our cousin from Vandergrift, the big city, came. And he wasn't very fast, and he bit him. Yeah, Plummy. Plummy got bit on the toe. But, no, it was a fierce time, but it was a good time. Young boys who carry your packages, now, my goodness, they knock you down. It's when I say being blind and slow, it's hard to go shopping.
Yeah.
It really is. But it's amazing how young people act. Respect.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole thing. Respect. And I always told my kids, now I had a big family. I had 6 kids. I wanted a big family. And when they needed a spanking, they got a spanking. I didn't say, wait till your dad comes home. They got a spanking then. So they knew what they'd done. And I said, sometimes I hurt myself just as much as I hurt you. But that's because I loved you. And not that I have saints for kids, but my kids respect me to this day. They do. And rules that I made then, they still carry.
What kind of rules?
Well, I believe a woman's purse is her own personal property. And not that she has anything in it that she's embarrassed by or whatever, but I don't see somebody else going and opening that purse and getting in it, even her children. I didn't get in my husband's wallet. He didn't get in my purse. And my children did. Another thing, kids that carry on for something in the store.
You guys didn't get to buy very many things.
No, I would tell my kids when we went to the store, no, I don't have very much money today. If I had enough to let them spend 50 cents or whatever, then I'd tell them. But that's it. And if I say no, no is it. But now you go in there and they scream and they yell and they holler and Ma's going, no, no, no. You get up to the register and what's the first thing she puts on there is what that kid's been bawling for. I'd have taken mine to the car and given them a couple cracks, but we'd have went shopping. But they just don't do that anymore.
Now, you had chickens and a pig.
We had chickens and a pig, and Aunt Sadie lived across the road, and she had a cow. So she had the milk and the butter. And then in the fall, Uncle Raymond Rufner, he had a big farm, and when he'd butcher, we'd get beef from him, and then we'd butcher one of our pigs. So we had the meat for the winter, but Grandma had the eggs, and Aunt Sadie had the butter and the milk. I can remember delivering butter and milk to people, and we walked to do it. And, you know, it was great fun. But and I can remember those uniforms. How I thought my uncle looked so great in that uniform. He was a good-looking man. But no, it just.
Now, did you have a garden?
Oh my, we always had a garden. Even my husband and I with the 6 kids, we always had a garden. Oh yes, big garden. And I would freeze things in a can and make jelly and make pies and all that. It's, it's funny how time goes on, but you still remember the good times. And I can remember when Uncle Blair went, then Aunt Sadie's Buzz went, and there was another one went at the same time. And Blair and Buzz stayed together for a while, but the other one didn't. But they all 3 came home. Yeah, they all 3.
Do you remember when they came home?
I remember Blair coming home. Oh, yes, that was a big day. Oh, my, we prepared for days. Oh, my, Aunt Sadie and Grandma and them, they baked, and oh, my, we had all the family out. In those days, you had the family reunions. They were family reunions. And I can remember how they all came to Grandma's, and that front yard was just full. It was, yeah, the good times. Yeah.
So what was your favorite food?
I've always been fond of food, period. Sweets mostly. Mama said before I went to Children's Hospital, and she'd have me at home, and I couldn't walk, she said, I'd be in the playpen, and Daddy would go down the street, and he would buy 6 maple rolls every morning. And she said when I'd get to fussing, she'd give me a piece of maple roll. I said, you ruined me, because I can't be near a maple roll to this day. But sweets, that was, and of course, that's been my downfall, too. But, no, I like a good cut of beef every now and then. And I do. I like steak and salad. But with it, I like my homemade bread. Or coffee soup. If you remember, during the war, we had coffee soup. If you didn't have anything else, you had coffee soup.
So tell us how to make coffee soup.
Well, you just take your coffee and you fix your coffee the way you like it to drink. And then you take a big piece of homemade bread. I don't like this bought bread. Homemade bread. And you put your coffee over it and you cover it with sugar. And oh, that makes the best meal. Yes, it does. And, well, you know, we didn't have much. And sometimes we didn't have much cereal or that. So, and I can remember it sitting down at the table. And we'd eat what was there, and if we were still hungry, Mom would say, well, fill up on bread, because she and Grandma both baked. And, but yeah, coffee soup, oh. My sister will call me every now and then, what are you having for supper? Oh, should I say I'm having coffee soup and bacon.
So did she bake once a week, or how many days a week did she bake?
Well, Mom usually only baked once a week, because Grandma baked other than her. But now when I had my kids, I baked twice a week. Yeah, twice a week. I can remember one time, my husband didn't work real well, and my sister's husband had always worked, and she had an appointment. She couldn't take her little girl with her. And she come by, and she dropped her off, and she said, what are you having for lunch? And I said, we're having lima bean soup, round ham, and homemade bread. Oh, she said, Robin will never eat that. Well, I said, we'll make do. Robin loved it. To this day, she still likes her lima bean soup. But they just didn't eat things like that. But that was a meal to us.
Yeah.
The first time I baked bread, I was married. I just turned 16. My husband was 19.
And that's when you got married? You were 16?
We lived next to this family that had, I think 10 kids. And my husband would get out of the car, and he had to walk past their house. And she baked bread all the time and come home. And he would talk about that bread. Oh, it smelled so good. So I thought, well, I can do it. So I walked down to the little store and I got a cake of yeast out and I read the recipe. I bought everything on that recipe. And I went home and he was working afternoon shift. And I baked him the bread. Oh, it was beautiful. Round loaves and just nice. Oh, it was beautiful. He come home. The man next door was out and he went out on the porch with a loaf of my bread. And he said, I was gonna feed it to your dog. But he said if I did, son of a bee would never hunt this year. He said it's so heavy and he hit it with a hammer. I was crying. Oh, I was so upset that I had tried so hard. So I went up to Grandma's and he didn't like me staying by myself. So when he'd go to work at 1:30, we would walk from our place like 3 miles up to Grandma's and then Pep would bring us home in the evening. And I told her about it and she said, well, we'll learn how to bake bread. So she taught me how to bake bread. But Grandma teaches with a pinch of this and a handful of that. And I have never taught my girls to bake bread because they can't understand what I'm doing. But yeah, that was, I'll never forget that bread business.
So did she tell you what it was you did wrong?
Yeah, I put too much yeast in it.
Oh, really?
It called for 2 cakes of yeast.
Uh-huh.
And that's what I put in it.
Uh-huh.
But you only use like half a cake of yeast for 4 or 5 loaves. You don't need 2 cakes.
Uh-huh.
And that's what I did. I put two cakes of yeast in it. Yeah. Life. Oh my. But you know that the boys used to leave on the trains. Now we don't have the train stations anymore. But they had a train station in Katanning and different places around where the boys left. Come home. Oh, that was great days when the boys had come home. We'd go even though it wasn't our boy. You went. Yeah. But it was fun time.
How'd you meet your husband?
My husband and I knew each other all our lives. Actually, I think back somewhere we were probably distant cousins. But he was a John, and my grandpap was a Hooks. Grandma and Grandpap Hooks. And they lived on this farm, and Grandpap John had this big farm over here. I mean, he was the meanest little boy you ever seen. I used to come home, I called him all kinds of bad names, and I'd say, I'm going to get him. I'm going to get Grandpa would say, honey, don't act like that. And my aunt said, here you are married to him. I said, yeah, but his kids will never be as bad as he was. And we just, well, Grandma, and he only lived, well, he lived at the end of the road, and then you went up to Grandma, so it wasn't even a mile. And we were around each other all our lives. Then he and my brother worked together. We started dating, and they drove back and forth to work together. So.
Did he get nicer?
Oh yeah, he got nice. He learned. I taught him. Yeah. No, he was an only child for 9 years, and he didn't have to share anything. And he didn't share. Well, I was raised in 6 kids. I mean, you share everything. And I can remember to one time we were going out somewhere and we had to stop at his house so he could change clothes and things. And he made himself a sandwich. And he had it on a little plate and set it there on the dining room table. He went in the bedroom for something and I just picked up his sandwich and took a bite. His mother said, my boys don't eat after anybody else. I said, well, he kisses me, so I don't know why not. And she was mad at me forever. But he learned to share. Yeah, he learned to share. You have 4 kids, you go to the store, you buy a lollipop, you buy 4 lollipops. That's the way it is. But it was a great time. We used to climb the trees and throw monkey balls down on people's cars.
Now, what are monkey balls?
That's this green. They use them now to keep spiders away. I don't really know what the real name of them are. They're green and they're knobby and there's nothing in them and you can't eat them.
Oh.
We call them monkey balls.
And they grow, I mean, they just grow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Over there in Adrian, going up the road, there's 2 or 3 trees. Bobby Ockey has a tree, and there's a tree on what used to be the John place.
So you were a welder,
Mm-hmm.
you worked at Toys, you had a restaurant. What was the name of your restaurant?
The Alamo.
Where was it
No,
at?
The Vault. The Vault. It was right next to the Alamo.
Uh-huh.
And it was an old, during the war they built it, and the people would go there and buy their bonds.
Uh-huh.
And it was like every so many feet was a window with bars and that where you bought your bonds.
Uh-huh.
And it was empty. And this friend of mine who was blind and I opened a restaurant in it. And the rest of the building was the FBI building. And was right next to the Alamo. Yeah, I had that down there for a while.
Now, where was it at?
In San Antonio.
Oh, it's in Texas.
Yeah, San Antonio.
Oh, you mean the Alamo, not...
Yeah, the Alamo.
Wow. And where were you a welder at?
In the same town.
In San Antonio.
Same town. I went to work at this place and they were kind of slow, the workers. Well, me, I like to move. So one day I was watching the welder, and I said to him, Louis, show me how to do that. And my girlfriend had went to work there too. And he kind of looked funny at me, and she said, oh, she can do it if you show her how. So Louis started teaching me, and I ended up a welder. One of the girls said to me one time, she said, I'd like to have just one of your paychecks. And I didn't realize after I retired, and that was when I made my most money, was when I was a welder. But oh yeah, I worked for Levi Strauss for 6 years. I was a supervisor there, but I've done some good things in my life. I always said when I retired I wanted to work with children. But I can't drive, I can't see, so what could I do with children? I ran a halfway house for drug and alcohols in Katanning for a long time. I still have men that stop me on the street. Yeah, my husband had a stroke and I had to quit working. So
How old were you when you had your first baby?
16, not quite 17. I had 4 in 4.5 years.
Oh my!
I was a busy mother. Oh,
You must have been.
But I grew up with my kids, and my dad and I were very close. And when I decided to get married, he told me, now you're making your bed. Remember, gotta lie in it, okay? And I'd had problems, and I'd go home and talk it over with Dad, and things would get worked out. But nowadays, I think they get married with the thought, well, if it don't work out, I'll get divorced. I know I have kids that are divorced, and I often wondered when the first one got divorced what I did wrong. That's the way life is. I had 4 in 4.5 years, and then I lost a couple, and I didn't have any for 5 years. And then I didn't have any for 7 years. The doctor thought I couldn't have any more, and all one day I popped up pregnant. And she's my one that passed away. She was 42 when she passed away. So I had a good life with my kids.
So she was a lot younger than the rest of them.
Yeah, and she'd lived in Las Vegas for a while, and she moved back to San Antonio, and didn't want to stay in one place. Well, she was a mechanic first of all. My husband was a mechanic, and she was a mechanic. She went to school for it and everything. She had a motor fall on her and break her wrist, and from then on it seemed like her problems just one after the other. She had spinal problems and I don't know what all. And
so how did you wind up San Antonio from Cadogan?
Well, as I say, my husband was a bad asthmatic.
Oh.
And then we moved to Pittsburgh for a friend that he wasn't working too good, and a friend of his went down there, and he knew what a mechanic Daryl was. And he went to work at this boat place, and they needed a mechanic. So he called Daryl to come down and be interviewed, and when Mr. Gregg interviewed him, he told him he'd send him to school every year. And we moved 70 miles with 4 kids for $2 an hour. $2 an hour, can you believe that? And the kids nowadays wouldn't even sniff at that. And so he sent them to school every winter. And he was a good mechanic. Oh, he was one of the best. And then he got this coughing problem. And at first we thought it was just sinuses, but he started coughing up pieces of his lung. So the doctor said he needs to go to another environment. So they tested him. I thought Arizona would be the one, but no, they said South Texas was where he should go. So the company found him a job in Corpus Christi. So I moved to Corpus Christi. My daughter had her baby. He was only 3 weeks old. And I had Mary Martha was 7 or 8 in a little pickup truck. We followed Dad. He had been down there for a while. And he went to Corpus Christi. Well, we were there a year and a half, and then the company he was working for had another place in San Antonio, and they were closing the Corpus shop. So we moved to San Antonio. We were there 15 years. And his mom and dad got off. Of course, mine did too. And his dad passed away, and his mother wasn't well. His lungs were healed enough that we come home. And of course, when he come home, he could never really seem to get adjusted because there wasn't that much work around here for boat mechanics. But he did. He had his own. When he died, he had 9 boats in the front yard. So he had his own shop. And then he worked for Hellman for a while. And he worked for New Ken for a while. And then he went up here to East Brady to Mark Lewis. He was working for Mark when he died. So I don't know. But I miss him because every time something would happen to the car, of course, he would say to me, well, fix it. Well, we're living with him for 50 years. I learned enough about the car. He bought me my own toolbox. Don't call home and say you broke down unless you can tell me what's wrong wrong with it. Then he'd tell me how to fix it.
Well, thank you very much for this.
Another thing, that hill down there where they put all that bony from the mine,
Yeah, yeah.
that still burns.
Really?
Burns
Now,
underneath.
is this the one in Cadogan?
Now, when they started piling that in there, and they dumped that in, and we'd go up there, different people, and we'd pick the good coal out of it.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
And they made that one whole hillside, and you'd have had 2 or 3 kids fall through that. I can't remember what the last one's name was, but it was a neck that fell through it. We used to ski down it because they made it so...
Right, yeah.
Yeah, but it still burns underneath, they say. I don't know.
No kidding.
Well, you know, and during the summer, when they were dumping this stuff, everybody got their coal house filled because we'd go picking coal. My mom used to laugh. She used to tell it, and it's true. You know, in Cadogan, we didn't have bathrooms for years. You had outside toilet. Well, then, every spring, along about April, the honey dippers came. And Mom said, we knew the honey dippers were in town because when the kids come home from school, they always had to stop and watch what the honey dippers were doing.
Now, they would take it from the outhouses and, what, make fertilizer out of it, or just clean them out?
They cleaned them out, and I assume they made fertilizer and put it in a big truck, you know. Every winter we went ice skating. Backwaters, we called it.
Uh-huh.
And we all ice skated down there. Yeah, every winter we went ice skating.
Now, what was the name of that creek?
All
See,
I
he didn't
ever called
remember
it
either.
was the backwaters.
The backwaters is what they called it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we ice skated down there. And then the one hill, when you go into Cadogan, you go up the top of the hill, and there's 2 roads. You know, one street goes this way, and this street is a hill.
Uh-huh.
That's where we sled rided, and nobody could drive a car on that hill in the winter because we had it so icy. We'd go up there and we'd build a big fire, and we'd take potatoes from home and stick them in the fire and all that stuff. Do our sled riding. You know, and in those days we did it as a group.
Uh-huh.
All good fun, except my sister laughed because the boys broke into the company store, and this one boy knew he liked my sister, and he knew she liked dried apricots, and he'd bring her dried apricots, and they were expensive then. Here we found out he was getting them at the company store. They were breaking in. Oh my goodness, she was afraid the police were going to come after her because she ate the dried apricot. We had our times of things like that then because the boys they did take some guns and stuff, and they hid them underneath. Well, it was we called it the band hall, but where we held dances and movies and stuff like that. And they didn't have anywhere else to put them, so they hid them under there. They got caught. It was about 14 of them. Dad called them the hellions. Yes, the times you think of. Yeah, we had dances down there in that. And we had movies. Then in the summer they'd have games for the kids during the day. And that was nice, because most of the time then the parents knew where the kids were. But it was nice talking to you.
It was lovely talking to you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.